It's hard to find a person who has never heard of Nero. His name has become synonymous with cruelty and is sometimes used figuratively. It is difficult to find a perversion in which he would not participate. And the most amazing thing is the popularity of Nero among the common people with his extreme cruelty and licentiousness. Despite many reasonable and humane decrees, now we hear only bad things about him. But let's take it in order. Nero's story begins with the story of his mother, Agrippina. And Nero's ascension to the Roman throne was entirely her doing. Julia Agrippina's sister Caligula, another Roman emperor known for his cruelty and depravity. And, according to rumors, like other sisters, she participated in his orgies. Agrippina's family was very privileged. Her father was a famous general. Her mother was from the family of descendants of Emperor Augustus. Her adopted grandfather, Tiberius, chose her husband. He became consul Gnaeus Domitius. It would seem that the descendants of such noble families should have a carefree life. But no. Due to the division of the throne between her father Germanicus and his adoptive father Tiberius, the girl's childhood was overshadowed by constant fear for her life. After the death of Tiberius and the ascent to the throne of her brother, a period of calm has come for Agrippina. It was at this time that she gave birth to Nero, but the silence was short-lived. Less than a year later, Caligula decided that his sister, and possibly an orgy partner, wanted to overthrow him. Two sisters and their potential lover were accused of the conspiracy. All of Agrippina's property was confiscated, and she herself was sent to a distant island, where she could not participate in palace intrigues due to the lack of suitable people for this. While she was in exile, her husband died of dropsy. Because of Nero was transferred to education of an aunt, Domitia Lepida the Younger, who did not invest much in his upbringing, since knowing the emperor's love for eliminating potential rivals, she did not think that the boy would live to at least 5 years old. He was accompanied only by a dance teacher. And you need to keep in mind that in Rome at that time, dancers, actors and poets occupied the lowest rung of the social hierarchy. However, Nero was lucky, and Caligula, he became a victim of a conspiracy before he remembered about an unkillable relative. The throne was occupied by Claudius, who was Nero's great-uncle. The old man did not leave into the distress of relatives. The mother returned from exile and reunited with her son. However, paranoia has not disappeared anywhere, and quiet times have only increased her desire for personal control over the situation. Moreover, the confiscated property was not returned to her, and she is in poverty. Claudius did not like to kill relatives, so his kindness gave space for his niece's ambitions. Agrippina's first goals were to gain wealth and power. Since in patriarchal Rome a woman could not get them herself, she asked Claudius find her a new husband. He became consul Gaius Sallust, who divorced another aunt of Nero for this marriage. And after a while he was poisoned, so that all his money went to Agrippina. For the next part of the plan, Agrippina found an ally, an advisor to the emperor, and a treasurer Mark Antony Pallant. Together they formed a coalition against Messalina, the wife Claudia. The courtiers, dissatisfied with the empress, began to rally around them. The intrigues proved so effective that they led to the execution of a woman and her lover for an attempted coup. The attractive place of the emperor's wife was freed up with the help of Agrippina was able to occupy her lover. At first, Claudius refused to participate in perversions that he did not order, but the advisor was able to convince him that marrying his niece would be primarily a political union and would unite the two dynastic branches. While the emperor was experiencing the joys of incest, Agrippina pressed him to adopt her son. And a year later it happened. Nero became the adopted son of Claudius and co-heir the throne. The second was the native son of the princeps senatus, Britannicus. In just 10 years, a poor exiled widow and her abandoned son had turned into an empress and heir to the throne. Someone would have stopped there, but not those whose family has been getting rid of useless members for generations. Agrippina sought allies for Nero and distanced Claudius from his own son. She was driven solely by her own ambitions, since Nero did not want to occupy the throne and did not have the ability to do so. He was sullen and spoiled, and he was much more willing to learn to play the lyre than anything else. Some have seen his cruelty, but they could not prevent the mother from placing her son on the throne. In 53, Agrippina arranged the marriage of Nero with Claudia Octavia, daughter of Claudius. To do this, she had to sweep away the resistance of both sides. Nero did not like the bride, but she had her own fiancé, the groom whom Agrippina forced to commit suicide, accusing of incest. After this forced marriage, there was only one step left to never have another person with power over her again. And in 54, she became a widow for the third time. Opinions: there is disagreement about the extent of her involvement. Some say that Claudius died of natural causes, others insist on poisoning the emperor with mushrooms. Allegedly, Agrippina bribed his taster. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. The point is that the empire had to move to Nero and Britannicus, but the latter was not yet capable in age, and Agrippina introduced Nero to all her allies as the sole ruler. Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus was crowned as Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, and in 16 Leth gained power over the Roman Empire. His mother must have felt absolutely happy to be settled in the center of the most powerful empire after so many years of persecution and hardship. However, the happiness, if she really felt it, was not long-lasting. She was trying to guide her relatively adult son, and he was thinking how much he needed it. Agrippina and her interference in the government of the country were opposed by the party of Nero's teachers, Seneca and Burr. The three of them she pushed the widow away from power and physically from the palace. Her affection for her son can be seen by the fact that she tried to defect to the Britannic team, but Nero poisoned a competitor and sent her mother to a villa on the outskirts of Rome. Just as he refused his mother's advice on governing the country, he refused her advice on choosing a wife. In 58, he became close to Poppaea Sabina, and a year later, when she became pregnant, he married her. The last straw was Agrippina's attempt to find a replacement for her son on the throne, his cousin. The teenage emperor made several attempts to get rid of his mother. He tried to poison me 3 times, sent an assassin, put me on a ship, which was later specially scuttled. But after this woman turned out to be the only one who reached the shore, he solved the issue radically and sent soldiers to her. Nero unconvincingly tried to present her death to the general public as a suicide. Apparently, Nero had the potential to become a good ruler, but his actions plunged him more and more into madness, from which he could not get out. At the beginning of his reign, he cancelled secret court hearings, actively fought corruption, and returned he gave powers to the Senate, reduced the amount of bail and legal fees, reduced taxes, replaced murders in the arena with fighting, forbade the freedom of the freedmen to be taken away again, and supported the poor in every possible way. In general, the first 5 years of his reign were called the greatest reign in Roman history. The common people loved him. Minor aristocrats in remote regions called themselves his relatives in order to advance in the service, but now they only remember the bad things about him, perhaps because history was not written by ordinary people, and the Roman aristocracy hated him. On the one hand, he had a lot of unpleasant habits. For example, spending time in a brothel or at parties with actors. As already mentioned, the social status of these places was the same. An additional shame was Nero's desire to perform himself and not necessarily to play a man. On the other hand, he did not disdain to commit murders where they could not be committed. For example, he divorced Claudia in order to marry Poppaea Sabina. But when he realized that her exile was an unpopular decision and the subjects missed their ex-wife, he ordered kill her. And he also tried to pass off this death as suicide. In addition to the death of relatives, he also had many aristocrats on his account, to whom he organized bloody purges. Besides the first, he has a second wife on his conscience. It is not known what exactly happened there, but when Sabina was pregnant with their second child, and Nero attacked and beat her, both the woman and the child died. The unintended violence and its consequences have increasingly shaken the man's mind. He increasingly played women and pregnant women on stage. He found himself a eunuch who looked like the wife he killed. The third side was his general promiscuity. The orgies were getting longer and longer. In addition to official weddings, the emperor participated in their dramatizations with men. Moreover, he sometimes acted as a husband, then as a wife. The most famous story about Nero is related to the fact that he allegedly set fire to Rome and played a musical instrument while looking at the flames. In fact, he was dozens of miles from the city, and then the wooden city burst into fire. He opened the doors of his own palaces for the residents left without a roof and made sure that they were not fed. Later, he ordered a redesign of the city, widening the streets and turning the entrances to the house towards them. rather than into the courtyard. That is, he made sure that the fires did not happen again. So how did it turn out that good intentions went sideways for him? Firstly, after the fire, he began to build himself a huge new palace with a 37-meter statue of himself at the entrance. And people thought that this was an inappropriate moment for self-admiration. Secondly, he began to look for the culprits. And the best choice for this role were the first Christians, an unpopular community at that time, represented in Rome mainly by refugees and non-citizens. And they became the perfect scapegoats. At first, they were tortured to extract confessions, and then they fed them to wild animals or burned them. After that, Christians were convinced that Nero was the Antichrist described in the book Revelations. All this together, attacks on aristocrats, cruelty to Christians, and generally strange behavior made the Senate think that the problem with the emperor should be solved somehow. But the first conspiracy was discovered in 65 and caused Nero a real nervous breakdown. 23 senators were ordered to commit suicide, including his old teacher Seneca. And that was just the beginning. The emperor resumed the treason trials, which executed dozens of people with almost no reason for this. The powder keg of discontent exploded when Nero ordered the governor of Gallia to raise taxes. He was not going to do this because the situation in his region was already as tense as it could be, and taxes were suffocating its residents. And Vindex rebelled against the emperor. Moreover, he referred to the then famous governor of Spain, Galba. That initially, I was not going to rebel, but having grasped the situation, I realized that it was more expensive to refuse myself. When the news of the uprising spread, everyone joined him. The Praetorian Guard, the Senate, army. On June 9, 68, Nero discovered that his palace was empty. By some miracle, he found several slaves ready to follow him and escaped. He could have gained support in the more loyal eastern lands, but did not manage to get there before the roads were blocked. He lived in his villa for some time, and then he stabbed himself with a dagger when he saw the approaching cavalry. His death interrupted the Julius Claudian line that had ruled Rome since it became an empire. This family destroyed itself and left only chaos behind. At that time, there was no strong leader who could take the throne. Galba really became the next emperor, but only for 6 months. Then he was killed, and the following emperors succeeded each other until the appearance of Vespasian. Despite the ambiguity of the personality, it is impossible to deny the atrocities of this man. However, it is not necessary to attribute too much to him. If Nero destroyed anything, it was not Rome, but his own family and the future of your country. This man was definitely insane and out of place. He gained power too early and used it too easily. However, like any human being, he is something more than his most terrible deeds.